There's no question that since 2017, the conversation around UFOs, UAPs, non-human intelligence, and disclosure has gone haywire. It started with the groundbreaking Leslie Kean, Ralph Blumenthal article in the New York Times entitled Glowing Auras, Black Money, the Pentagon's Secret UFO Program. Then we got the now infamous Gimbal, Go Fast, Tic Tac videos. We had To the Stars Academy, Lou Elizondo, David Grush, congressional hearings, the Schumer Amendment, the Soul Foundation, and at this point, it seems like something new and exciting is happening almost every week. The question is, how do you stay on top of it all, and how do you get good quality information with so much going on? If you spend any amount of time online, eventually you realize that one of the biggest repositories of UFO information anywhere on the internet is actually Reddit. And on Reddit, the UFOB subreddit is one of the best places you can go to have conversations about all this stuff and stay up to date. UFOB is short for Unidentified Flying Objects, and it's a smaller subreddit, just under 100,000 members right now, started by a group of moderators who take this issue very seriously, and they wanted a place to have a frank, honest, and open conversation without a lot of the bullshit that you find in some of the other subreddits. It's where I go, and it's where I do a lot of research for this show. If you haven't already seen it, you should go back and watch my interview with Pix or It Didn't Happen. He's one of the mods of UFOB. I recently had the opportunity to sit down with another mod from UFOB who goes by the screen name Remzy2907. We had a great conversation about the subreddit. We talked about Remzy's personal experiences that brought him into the fold and led him to start this journey. He also runs the UFOB YouTube channel, which is a great place to go for UFO-related documentaries, clips, and information and videos on the subject. I hope you enjoy the interview. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel. It really does help. Don't forget to like and share this video. Thank you for watching. Now enjoy the interview.
What kind of work do you do when you're not doing UFO stuff?
Well, I'm a politician.
Really?
Yeah, a local politician. So that's what I work in. And that's difficult because, I'm in a chat also on WhatsApp with these people. And sometimes I tell about it and it's like, okay, no, this has nothing to do with local politics. And I'm like, yeah, but it could become very important because these things fly over our heads, no matter the border, So, yeah, but it's nice. And I did a lot of things for my town, good things, and people like it. So, and that's my motivation also,
Do you find that generally your UFO research world is separated from the everyday people that you talk to 9 to 5? I mean,
yes,
is there any crossover at all?
Well, I decided at one point, like, okay, I'm honest about it. I speak about it. If they call me crazy, so be it. It's a choice you make. And there are people who are very afraid of it. But why? Because if everybody is like that, you're not progressing in any way. So no, for me this works best, to be honest, and speak about my experiences because some things happened to me which were incredible, really incredible, and it was in the 90s, and the 90s was a crazy period for me personally, like almost magical, totally different than today. And because, I look up a lot, I never see anything, never. But the things that happened here between 94 and 97 were crazy, really. And but of course also in the 70s, but that I didn't, I'm almost 49, I'm 49, almost 50. So the 70s were not my, I wasn't that conscious in that time. Yeah.
I think you make a really great point about making a conscious choice to talk about it and
yes.
just accept it as a part of reality. And I think many people, including myself too, I had to really struggle with that when I started doing this on YouTube.
Yeah.
And because I have a professional life separate from this, and I try not to mix the two. But I think it's important to normalize the conversation, and the only way you can do that is by talking about it. Absolutely. And not being afraid of what people think, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also a matter of trust. Many people say, okay, your story, is it trust me bro? And then I say, yeah, that's it. Yeah. That's it. It's trust me bro, because I'm telling a story and I'm not doing this for fun. I'm not doing this for fame. You have to trust me at some point. And that's when it comes down to how we interact as human beings, We have to trust each other. Of course, there are a lot of people lying or creating stories. That happens too. But at some point, you have to trust somebody. And that's
Let me ask you this. And then first I want to ask you this question, and then we'll go into your background. If you were talking to someone who's fresh to this subject, and they asked you, tell me what's going on. What is the situation right now in 2024? Yeah. What would you tell them?
I would tell them that UFOs, it's a subject. I see it like this. There are different realities parallel to each other. For instance, if you're not interested in this subject, you will never hear about it. You will never see it on the media. Every now and then you see it, but people say, oh, okay, not my piece of cake, okay. But the moment you're going to invest time in it, and the moment you put effort in it, you'll notice, wow, this is real, this is happening, it's incredible. And that's the strange thing about this subject. There are two parallel realities. And eventually they will merge together, because you see now these two realities are bumping into each other every now and then, especially now with politics in the US especially. That's what I like about the US, because the people there are so much more open to this subject instead of in relation to Europeans. It's starting to happen now, because in the Euro Parliament people are waking up. But in America they are much further in this process. And that's also worrying. So what I tell people is, okay, this subject is increasingly becoming more important. But the dilemma here is that people don't see it every day. Every now and then people see a light in the sky or something. So, but it's mainly military. You see these objects are mainly harassing military bases. And that's strange, because there is an interest from this phenomenon in the military bases, also on the oceans, around the oceans, ships, Navy ships. And that's strange, because you would expect from an extraterrestrial or interdimensional phenomenon that it's interested in us and in our culture and how we think, etc., not in our military capabilities. And that's what I find worrying, in a sense. Because, perhaps they worry about us destroying each other. That's a possibility. I can imagine, they deactivate nuclear weapons, and they even activated several, in the US and in the Ukraine. That's something that's not discussed a lot, but it happened. Absolutely sure of it. So, to someone who isn't familiar with the subject, I would say that, okay, learn about it, because sooner or later this will be on your plate. And that's what I tell people, because the ontological shock, as they say, the shock, it's a paradigm shift. It's called a paradigm shift, not for nothing. Yeah. And That's why I created the YouTube channel, to give people a possibility to learn about the history based on their own interest. Because if you're not interested in cattle mutilations, skip the playlist. Yeah. If you're interested in the pilots, look at the playlist. It's all there. Separated by year and subject. So you can get the information you like, you prefer. Yeah.
Do you think, based on what you see and in your own study, that there is an increase in activity right now, that we're seeing a ramp up in activity, or are we just seeing more activity because we're looking for it now and more people are looking for it?
That's a good question. And it's also a difficult question, because only the military would know if there is an increasing, if it's increasing. I do think that it's now focusing, the phenomenon is focusing mainly on the military targets. And they used to focus on the civilians, on the people, like abductions. You can believe in it or not, but there is something happening. And especially in the 90s, there were a lot of people saying they were abducted. And now, today, you don't hear it as much. Maybe it still happens, but you don't hear it as much. So it's like they are performing certain operations. Like, okay, this was the era of the abductions. Okay, we did that. This is the era of military interaction. Okay, we did that. It's like stages. But what is it leading to? That's the whole question. I don't believe that they want this planet. I think that's too easy to say that. But they have their own interests in this planet, and what it is, I can only guess. Yeah.
Do you think that the moment that we're in right now, I kind of think of the history of UFO or ufology as everything in ancient past up to Roswell, then Roswell until 2017 is like its own separate phase. And then 2017, it seems like things really took off and started to accelerate. Do you think we're moving towards some kind of a climax where are we going to be alive to see the day where there's contact, or is something coming that is going to change our day-to-day lives in a really measurable, noticeable way?
I think that what we see happening now in the United States is amazing. With the UAP caucus, Congress people are waking up. They are talking to each other. They are like Congressman Burleson, they are now creating, what's it called? I forgot what it was exactly, but they signed for creating a new office or something. And so I think we're heading somewhere, yeah. And the Pentagon is now clutching at straws, like, okay, what do they are panicking. It's clearly true, and that's what we see happening now. And that's why they created this Arrow report, which, is a piece of toilet paper, in my opinion. Sorry. And but it works for the people who are generally not interested in this topic, because that's the prize to win, the opinion of the public. You have the community on one side who want to influence the public opinion, and on the other side you have the Pentagon who wants to keep it all the way it is, So it's interesting to see how that develops. But I think we're actually getting somewhere, because if you compare this time with pre-2017, it's totally different. We've had hearings. Well, we didn't have so many hearings before that. So in the past, I believe we had one hearing in the past, one or two. So I think we're actually getting somewhere. Yeah, and
do you get the sense that? Go ahead.
Perhaps 10 years from now, but I don't think it will lead to contact. I don't think so, because this phenomenon has its own will, its own agenda. And what's the admiral called? Gallaudet, Admiral Gallaudet. He said there had been contact. So it is possible that it happened in the past. But what it is and how, I don't know. We'll have to hear later about that, because I think it's still classified. Yeah? That's the thing. I mean, it's the national security implications. It's difficult, because this phenomenon has the classification higher than the H-bomb.
Do you get the sense that something is accelerating this conversation? We've heard conversations about there's some kind of an event that might happen, or something that could be coming in 2027 or 2030. I've heard different dates kicked around. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think there's something going on?
Well, the strange thing is that you hear mainly from the ex-CIA people about 2027, you know? Is that information of it, or is it misinformation? And if it is misinformation, why? Why talk about an event? Because if that event never happens in 2027, everybody will be like, you see, it's all nonsense. And maybe they drop the interest altogether, you know? You don't know what's behind it. And Jim Semiphon, I think Jim Semiphon is quite an honest guy, because he said that very serious things happened to people. So I think that when I look him in the eye, I think, okay, yes, it could be true what he's saying. I think aspects of this phenomenon are malevolent. That doesn't mean that it's all malevolent, of course. Some certain aspects, I think, are malevolent. And that's when we come to Louis Elizondo, because Louis Elizondo spoke to people in government who told him, drop it. And Louis Elizondo said, why? Well, because this is demonic. Did you read your Bible? And then he was like, okay, but shouldn't we study it then at least? Or how can we decide if this is demonic or not? How can you independently decide that? I mean, when you find wreckage at Roswell and you see bodies, you cannot discern or decide for yourself, okay, this is demonic. Was there a little paper where, hello, we are demons? No, you know what I mean? Right. So it's difficult, I think. And maybe certain people are convinced this is a demonic phenomenon. And then we're entering a totally different discussion, because there are a lot of people who think it is, and that they are like parasitic entities who need our energy, and that they are creating division in our society so that they get more food. Yeah, that's in essence what it comes down to. And I'm open to any possibility. So I try to look at it in an agnostic way, you know, like, okay, it could be. And if it's demonic, then what? But if it's ET, then what? If it's interdimensional, then what? So that's something I try to look at all the aspects of the phenomenon.
I think that's a particularly, I'm going out on a limb here, but I think it's a particularly American mindset that the American military tradition tends to be very conservative, and a lot of the conservative type folks who wind up in the military and spend their life and their career in it tend to come from that a Christian mindset, a Christian background, and that's their upbringing, and so their perspective is colored by that, and that's the vocabulary that they bring to the conversation. And so because so few people are allowed to look at this subject, I think we have a very small minority of decision makers that no one else elected, no one chose. We don't know who they are. We don't know how many there are. And they're making decisions that affect all of us. And I think that's frightening for many reasons. But it definitely seems like this conversation about demons and angels and all this stuff, I think it muddies the waters, and it makes it very confusing for a lot of people to get involved. Do you think that we're dealing with one phenomena, or is this a number of different things? In other words, is this one super intelligence that's manifesting in different ways, or are we dealing with, say, 20, 30, 40 different alien species that are coming here and going for their own reasons, and they have independent motivations? What do you think is going on there?
Well, I see it like this, when human beings go into space and we colonize planets, imagine, sooner or later, groups will be forgotten, because they travel into space and there is no oversight who's where. And in the end, there will be maybe millions of groups of human beings in space. And I think that happened already. So, we think we are the species in the universe and the universe is waiting for us. I don't think that's true. I think the universe has already been colonized. So, and I think that the species that come here, we see a lot of types of great people I say, but great beings. In people see them or people talk about them. And they can be long, they can be short, they have bigger heads, smaller heads. But in the end, the black eyes are something that always comes back in these stories. So it's possible that they colonized the universe, or at least the Milky Way. And that the groups that are coming here have their own interest. So the thing is, when a UFO lands and a gray comes out, in one instance you can shake a hand, and the other you get the ray. You know what I mean? You don't know how they will respond. So that's the difficult thing about UFO. The best thing is to run away, I think, because
Especially if you read Bud Hopkins and Dave Jacobs' books, then run away.
Yeah, but look at Ariel School event was not malevolent, So I think that was a benevolent case or a benevolent sighting. So it's both, I think. But the thing is, we don't know how, and maybe they have there's this thing in Star Wars, and they have Star Trek, the Prime Directive. You cannot interfere with primitive societies. You can study it, but you cannot interfere. I think that's happening. So we see a lot of beings, from interdimensional, with an interdimensional background, or from planets, ET, but they cannot interfere with us. I think that's the case, but that's an assumption.
But don't you think that they seem to be interfering all the time? Anytime they turn off our nuclear weapons or switch off an aircraft carrier, or interfere with military training exercises. I mean, they interfere. That's the thing. I hear that a lot, and it seems to me that they don't really care either way.
There's a physicist. He's a Belgian physicist. His name is Auguste Mason. Great guy, because I studied his work. He's from the University of Louvain in Belgium, and he did a lot of work for the Belgian Wave, scientific work. And what was the question you asked? Sorry.
About interference in day-to-day human activities. They seem to be interfering a lot.
Yes, that's what he said. He said they're giving us hints. And and these hints guide us towards some end game. And what that is, I don't know. But for instance, the military is conscious of the fact that they disable nuclear weapons. Period. They know that they don't like, and probably they don't like it in space as well, because they say that the Russians are planning nuclear weapons in space. Well, good luck, I would say, because I don't think they accept it. But that's my personal opinion. I don't think they accept it. And that's what we're seeing. And that's also happening in Ukraine. There's a lot of UFO activity in Ukraine, also recently with the war. So they are absolutely monitoring us. Yeah, it's absolutely true. So, but it's possible they give us hints, like a little guidance. Maybe they don't want ourselves to blow ourselves up. You know, it's possible.
It seems like a display of power to me, right? Like, what's more impressive than dropping an atomic bomb on somebody or using a nuclear weapon, right?
Yeah.
Just being able to switch it off. Like in the movies, when you see somebody pulls out a gun and then the other guy just takes the gun away. It seems like there's a very big divide online between what people call the love and light brigade and then the, I don't want to call it UFO doomers, but the people who are a little bit more nervous about what might be going on. Mm-hmm. Do you find that, or do you think it's more of a spectrum?
I think it's a spectrum. Yeah, absolutely. Because there can be malevolence, there can be benevolence, and they all have their own agendas. So,
what is your own personal background with the subject? How did you become so involved in it?
I had a few experiences between the year 1994 and the year 1997. You know. And that's what I gave an interview for a Dutch channel in Dutch. And I started with, okay, you know, people already raise an eyebrow when you have one UFO experience. But when you tell them 4, generally it's like, okay, case closed. But you have to remember that there was a Belgian wave in the 90s, early 90s. And my personal theory is that it shifted north to the Netherlands after the Belgian wave. Because I had 4 experiences and 2 with people with me. So I'm happy that I wasn't the only one. And the first one was in 1994, and I can tell you about the experiences. I live in a town about 30 minutes north of Amsterdam, and my parents were divorced. So my mother worked very hard for the household, etc. She was never there. But then when she was there at night, in the evening, we always sat together in the garden and spoke about things and the universe, because my mother and we are interested in these things. So we were sitting in the garden and we were discussing my birthday, because I would be it would have been my birthday in a few weeks. So we're on the chairs and I was showing my mother the stars, and we put our chairs together at the back, you know, and like we were watching the sky, and suddenly I noticed a light coming towards us. But it was like, it was not moving like at one speed, but it was like as if it was monitoring everything, you know, watching, and it stopped above our heads suddenly. And the thing is, I said to my mother, "Do you see it? Do you see it?" And she said, "Yes, yes," because what can you say in such a moment? And the thing, it made a swipe to the left, to the right, to the middle, back to the middle, where it came from, and it left as if it was going the same track. So we were completely baffled, like, what's this, you know? And it was not the typical UFO, because normally you expect, of course, a saucer, but it was not really a saucer. I couldn't even see the shape because it was so fast. But the sudden movement, it's the 90-degree turns, and the sudden stop and the sudden acceleration was incredible. And well, recently I interviewed my mother. I don't know if you can show the clip. And
what was your reaction when you saw it? What did you think?
We knew immediately
how
what it was.
How old
19.
were you?
19.
You were 19. Okay.
Yeah. So, but you're not, UFOs are not what you're thinking of when you're 19 years old. No, let's be honest. But this was, we immediately knew what this was. And that's the nice thing about it. It's in fact, we saw one of the 5 observables. We saw, well, maybe several. We saw instant acceleration or instant speed. We saw sudden stop. So it was incredible, and but no sound. That's strange, total absence of sound. And I have the idea that there was a little glow around the object, and but it went so fast. And but this is how it started. And so the next day, a friend came over, and he was a friend who came to our house a lot, and he had problems with his relationship. So my mother spoke to him, and of course we discussed what happened. And he was laughing, couldn't handle it, and I was angry. And I went upstairs to my room, and I was like, fuck him, And I looked outside of the window, and there was this, as if somebody was with a mirror shining in your eye, that with the sun. Mm-hmm. And it was very reflective, extremely reflective, like greenish, silverish. And I was like, okay, what's that? Is it an airplane? Because I was thinking, like, if I'm yelling downstairs now, like, I'm seeing something strange, come, and it appears to be an airplane, this guy doesn't believe me at all, you know? So I watched it, and there was a little cloud, and this object went behind the cloud. But it was a single cloud. So I kept my eyes on the cloud. It never came from behind it. And that's strange, because when it's an airplane, you know, it has to come from behind the cloud. It never did. And for me, that was very strange, because I was thinking, like, how is this possible? How is this possible? Because how could they know that I was discussing it, you know? Or, yeah, it's strange. Maybe it's just a coincidence. But it felt like, hello, we're here, and we're showing you it was real. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that is necessarily the case, but that's the idea I got. And so they were there in the area doing things. And there was a nuclear reactor in our area who had leaks at that moment. And there was an earthquake also. Imagine that. In the same week. So, yeah, maybe they were drawn to that. It's a possibility. Because the reactor, they make a medication there. And this reactor wasn't safe. There were cracks. And it was a scandal also. So, perhaps that's what they were drawn to. But it's very close by. So, but it was strange. It was a daylight sighting. And I cannot explain it, because an airplane is air buoyant and has to move. And when it is above a cloud, it has to come from behind the cloud. So, but I didn't say it, of course, to the guy downstairs. But later I told my mother. So that was the second experience, and I think that was the same object, or the same area they were monitoring or something. But it was 1994, and it was early July, and the Ariel school case was 2 months later, in September. Mm-hmm. So there was definitely something going on. And then the third experience was in 95. And that was, for me personally, the most scary one, because a friend came over and he asked me to bring him to the bus station. But you know, in Holland we all ride a bike. So he was sitting on the back of the bike, and I brought him to the station, and I went back to my house. And I was looking at the stars, and I was cycling, and I was like, wow, beautiful sky, a few clouds, and a full moon. And from one moment to the other, I looked at an enormous round disc exactly above me. But it wasn't hanging still, it was moving in a one straight line. But the moment I looked up, it was exactly above me, and it was pitch black. There was no lights, nothing, pitch black. And I was like, okay. I knew immediately this is a UFO, point. I pulled my brakes, and I kept my eyes on it. And it went in front of the moonlight, you know, of the full moon. And I saw saw it from the side. So, and I realized that it was quite thick also, so it was this shape. But it was enormous. I estimated about 30 meters across, but it's difficult because you don't have a reference, you know, you don't know how high is it. So it's always an estimation. And my intuition says it was about 30 meters. So that would be 90 feet about. It went over my head. It never stopped. So it went a straight line, and I saw it disappear in the distance, and I saw it pass in front of the moonlight. So I saw it contrast, and it was big, and it was a typical saucer. Yeah, I can't make it otherwise. And It had no lights. So what people always
was
think
it
is
completely? Was it
Completely
black or was it just
Black.
metallic black?
No, blacker than black. So it's almost as if light is not reflected by it. So I call it a camouflage mode. If I never looked up, I would never have seen it. You know what I mean? Because you don't hear it, and it was even a little bit traumatic for me. Not in the sense that that I cannot cope with seeing a UFO, seeing such an object, but I was totally alone. I couldn't share it with anybody. But I did think at that moment, like, okay, you sneaky bastards, flying around without us knowing, and in a camouflage mode also, because otherwise they could have put on the light show, but they didn't. But
did you feel like you had a impulse to look up when you did?
Yeah.
You like you did?
Yeah.
Did that come from outside? Do you think, or were you just looking up and there it was?
Well, when I sit on the bike, I always look up because I love the stars. I love the universe. I'm also a very scientific person, so I read a lot about it. And but I always think it's strange that the moment I look up, this thing is there, and it was a magical experience, and also
you know how some experiencers describe, like, they hear this, like it's almost like a thought comes into their mind, like, look over there, and they look and there it is. Like, did you have that?
No, I didn't have a message or something, but I did feel the urge to look up. So maybe it's the same, but I interpreted it in a different way, like I was accidentally looking up. But it was a very strange experience. And also people say to me, how do you know this is not human technology? Well, I never saw this in my life, even today. And it was so elegant in the way it moved. It's almost like when you throw a stone over the water, it skips over the water like that. So easy. So and it's technology which is far more advanced. And but the why and camouflage mode, I don't know. But they were there.
It makes you wonder how many, like, even as we sit here right now, how many hundreds or thousands of these ships could be all around in the atmosphere and orbit.
Yes.
It's almost impossible to calculate.
Yes, and Richard Dolan said it once in a podcast. He said, "What are they doing at 3 a.m.?" When everybody is asleep, they hover above your houses, and it's so easy. We're sitting ducks in essence. But it's also as if they don't want to scare us, because why do you fly on why totally black? Yeah, but it was a crazy experience, and that was the only one in which I was totally alone. There were no people around me, and it was.
I wonder if you had been in a car, if the car would have shut down. You know how we always hear stories about the car turns off. Did you hear?
Yeah.
Another thing that people commonly describe is that all the sound, all the insects, all the birds, everything goes completely quiet. Did you have that experience at all before you saw the crash?
I didn't hear anything around me. No, I didn't hear anything around me. So normally, the Netherlands is a busy country. There's always sound, like a road or people around you. There were no people. It was strange, very strange. But it was 1995, and it was a different period, and it was, I believe, on a Monday evening. So people were working the next day, so everybody was asleep. And it was totally.
Did you experience any missing time?
I don't know, because when I came home, I told my mother, of course, because she knew, of course, because of the first experience we had together. And but I never discussed with her, like, okay, how long was I away? I don't know. No. So, and that's something, I would like to go in regression one time, just to feel it again, experience it again. I never done it, so, but I don't know what comes out of it, to be honest. Yeah. But I never forget it. If you can show the animation, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, hang on.
Because this animation doesn't show the fact that it was above me, because I couldn't, but how it moved away. So this is what I saw.
What you saw, just to be clear, it was a smooth motion.
Yes.
It was flying in a smooth line. It wasn't like click, click, click.
No.
Because some people have described that, where it looks...
Yes. Yeah. But this was a constant, in a straight line movement.
Wow.
So, and even when I looked at it on its underside, it was moving, And yeah. The next day I had to make an exam for school, and I messed it up. I was looking around in my classroom, and if you only knew what I had seen yesterday evening.
Did you just go home and then go to sleep normally, and or were you up all night thinking about it? Like, oh my God,
I didn't sleep. Yeah, of course. And the next day I had to go to school, and I was in my class, and we had this exam, and that was the only exam I messed up. I couldn't concentrate, and it was so surrealistic, because you look around like, okay, and everybody is acting as sort of being normal, and I was like, okay, you're in a total different reality, and you can't go back to old reality.
Isn't it strange? I think about that all the time. How it seems like the day-to-day trivialities of our normal 9-to-5 lives here on Earth, and we're just sort of like scrambling to get through our day and thinking about all the little problems that we have. But meanwhile, there's this enormous reality that's just, it almost feels like it's right there. It's just outside of reach.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It just seems like I want to get there. I want to get, like, I want to see what's on the other side of that hill, you know?
Yeah. And a lot of people say to me, okay, you're lucky. It doesn't always feel that way, because you cannot go to old reality, you saw it. And when you deny it, you're in essence lying to yourself. So, that's, I try to give it, that's why I started this UFO community, because I want to do something with it and tell the story. And, but, normally I never speak about my own experiences. I try to, show people the good cases, the military cases, the pilot cases, because I'm just an ordinary citizen, and with a story, of course, an extraordinary story. But people generally believe the pilots, because they are professionals. Yeah, that's true. That happens, and not that I don't have the ability to to distinguish an airplane with wings from a round object. No, of course not. But people generally believe pilots. Yeah. So,
how did that shape this experience and your previous experience? How did that shape your worldview going forward from that moment? I mean, did that change the way that you think about your day-to-day life?
Yes. Absolutely. And, I know people are so occupied with things that are not important. I hear it on the streets. It's always about money, about buying things, about material stuff. There's a reality which is so much more exciting. And we have to, and that's, I think, a very important message. We have to develop We have to. Is that spirituality? I don't know, but we have to grow. We have to expand. We cannot just stay people who just go to work, eat, sleep, and that's it. There's much more to life, but it's also a free choice. People have the free choice to learn, to about this subject. Or
it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because I think choice comes up a lot in this conversation about people choose to believe, and it's but the message has been so muddied over the years, and there's so much interference from the government and from different organizations that are trying to manipulate the message and make it seem silly or like a risk to your career to even look into it. And I don't think people have really had the full. For one, we don't have all the facts, and the facts that we do have, we don't even really know what's true and what's not, because so much has been tampered with. You mentioned this is one of the reasons why you started the subreddit UFOB. Can you talk a little bit about that as you decided to expand the conversation in your own way? What was the inspiration behind that, and how did that get started?
The personal experiences, of course. So I know it's real, and I want to. And I was like, okay, it's real. Now I have to do my own research. And that's what I did. And it's very difficult to do research because everything is scrambled around. Even today, I hear about cases. I'm like, okay, how is it possible? I never heard about this case. And so there are a lot of cases, and there's so much. It's so incredible that it's just out there in the ether. And when you're not interested in the subject, you don't hear about it, you don't see it. And that's so strange. And that's why I created UFOB, because I wanted to create a community. I wanted to offer a place where people can discuss it without being ridiculed. And that's why we said, okay, I know personally that this is real. So let's start from there, We say, okay, this is real. That's what Pix said recently on your podcast. That's our starting point. That is real. And that changes the whole discussion, because when you get people like, weather balloon, that's not progressing in any way. Of course, sometimes there are cases that are prosaic, and sometimes we make a mistake. That happens. But generally, we show good cases with pilots and stuff. But it's unbelievable, in my opinion, because sometimes there are pilots who see a UFO. It's recorded on radar. And sometimes there is even another aircraft involved with people who see it. There's a good case called in Argentina, the Barry Lodge case. I don't know if you know it. There's a pilot, Polanco, and all the people inside the airplane saw the UFO. And the thing is, when the pilot decided to change his course, he noticed that the UFO was already anticipating what he wanted to do. So it was like, this craft is reading my mind. It's crazy. Then, when he wanted to land on the landing strip, all the lights went out. He couldn't land because there was a power outage on the airfield. Finally, in the end, the light went back on, probably because of a generator that started working. And they landed safely. And he went on television everywhere. And it was a great case. It's a great case because it's not just the pilot who sees it, but the entire airfield was affected. The people inside the aircraft saw it. And they all went on television. They were interviewed. And that's what I try to do also, is to translate these cases and subtitle them into English so it's easier for people. I recently translated a lot of French cases Brazilian cases. It's a lot of work, but it's very nice to do. Yeah. And so that's the thing. I mean, you cannot explain this away like Mick West, prosaic. It's just this or just that. No, it's impossible. Really impossible. Because a radar glitch is possible with one radar installation. But when you have several radar installations, it's impossible. Also, when you have people seeing it. So, yeah, we're fooling ourselves.
Recently, we had the Arrow report released that was pretty universally panned and frowned upon. What are your thoughts on that? And do you have any opinions on that report?
Yes. Well, you have to go back in history because the Condon report, for instance, I believe it was 1968, the Air Force was really looking for a university to create a report, for a university to help them creating a report in which the outcome was already known. And they found this university. It was the University of Colorado. And the man, Edward Condon, was the physicist, a good one also. But they probably spoke with him like, okay, Edward, we need you to help us because this is a subject that can cause panic and we need to play it down. And that's essentially what we want you to do. So Richard Dolan made a beautiful episode on it about James McDonald, and he speaks about the Condon report also. And he said that Condon even got a mild heart attack because of the stress involved in this report. Imagine. And he fired the crew and totally replaced it, because the crew noticed this is real. So what he had to do is, okay, replace them. And finally, the report came out, and there is this little video with James McDonald, the physicist, the American physicist, who later committed suicide, unfortunately, because of ridicule. Some people say he was killed. Okay, I'm not saying that. He did one attempt, which failed, and he turned blind, and he did it a second time again. And he was found dead. It's such a waste. I mean, a brilliant physicist. And the other one was Donald Kehoe. And they spoke together about this report, Condon report. And they said, this is crazy. This is a crazy report. And it's history repeating, because we see that happening now with the Arrow report again. But what I find strange is that Senator Gillibrand she made sure this Arrow report, this Arrow office was funded. She said she wanted more transparency. She even said on a video, which is on Twitter, that Arrow did find evidence. And now this report. If I was the senator, I would be like, okay, Mr. Kirkpatrick, what are you doing? Because this was meant to cause more transparency, and look what you're doing. But she's silent. She's silent. And that's what I find strange. There are strange things happening. And I think that it's like this. She genuinely wanted transparency, but I think the DOD came in between. And they probably said to her, don't go this, stop. That's what they do, I think. And so she's silent now, especially after David Grush. Because Senator Gillibrand said on a meeting somewhere in the country, she said, this guy now comes forward. And I was saying, this guy? It's he's from the intelligence. And he's a veteran. This guy is strange. Yeah. It's very strange.
It's interesting how the first couple pages of the Arrow report, they just straight up tell you, we just looked at all of the other reports we put out over the last 50 years that we designed to tell you nothing, and we found that there's nothing there. So it's just the greatest hits. It's like a greatest hits CD.
Yeah, absolutely. And I understand it from their perspective. I mean, imagine if this truth comes out, and they have to admit we lied to you for all this time.
That's
Yes, we are sitting on exotic technology because, let's be honest, that's happening. For instance, let me give a little example. There was this crash in Brazil, the Virginia crash.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people say, it's nonsense and blah, blah, blah. But what I find interesting is that there was a military craft landing the next day or in the days after, unmarked. It was a military aircraft from the United States military. But the controller of the tower, he said, there was this aircraft coming in, and he didn't have any, that's what they call avum in Brazil, that you announce that you're arriving. But there was no announcement. That's crazy, because it's already crazy that an American aircraft lands there, let alone that it has no announcement of that it's saying, okay, hello, we are from the military. No, nothing like that. And they couldn't land in Virginia. They landed on the airstrip of Campinas. From there, 2 helicopters got up and went to Virginia. And that's where the whole thing happened with the hospital and the beings and et cetera, et cetera. But there were also military people from the US there instructing the local military what to do, because they have their script, of course. And there was this woman who said, we couldn't talk because the society would collapse. And this was an ordinary woman from the streets, and I was like, okay, this is in a report from NASA, because NASA commissioned a report, and their conclusion was, it was in early 60s, I forgot the name. The conclusion was that society would collapse. And I was like, how can you know that? In Brazil, rural area, how can you know the content of a report that is in essence still secret? That society would collapse. This is what the people were told. And that's what the Americans told the military in Brazil. You have to do this because otherwise society will collapse. Of course, people will do their thing, And these are the little nuggets I find interesting, because it's and this operator said they landed there, and when they went back, they had their sign on that it was Air Force, United States Air Force. So for me, and there is now, of course, they say that there is a CIA Access, Global Access, Office of Global Access.
Global Access Program, yeah.
Well, this is it. There's a crash.
This is it.
And the United States lands there, they do their thing, and they clean the whole mess up, and they take the beings with them.
Are you familiar? There's another case in Peru with a Marine. Are you familiar with this guy? And he tells the story about a crash that happened in Peru, and he was, I think he was a corporal. I mean, he was a pretty low rank guy, and then the guys came in and they had no insignia on their uniform, and they said, we're going to throw you out of a helicopter in the jungle. You can't talk about this.
This is pretty crude two-dimensional drawing, but this is jungle here, and this was the craft, and it was embedded in the rock like this, and I'm not sure if this tapered off or how it went, but these right here are the hatches, these two objects here. This one was the one that was half open, and you could see into it, but I mean, it was just black. It was like looking into a closet. 10 meters in width and about 20 meters in length. I'm just not sure. That's just an estimate from what I remember, but it was huge. I mean, it was big, man. And it was shaped like almost like between an egg and like a teardrop almost. It looked really aerodynamic, at least in the shape, but the closer I was close enough to take out detail on it, that it was not just smooth. There was bumps and notches and things in it. It was really organic. It was almost like art. That's really how you would It didn't look like something that somebody made in a shop, you know. It looked to be that it could have been handmade, but you know, out of what and what materials, I don't know. See, this is the whole thing. It looked metal, but it didn't have any reflection on it, man. I mean, you know, the sun's coming down, and if you got something made of metal, regardless of it, I mean, maybe if it's subdued with paint and it's got a cami sheen on it, you know, you're not going to see any reflection. But you know, I could see the different shades of the craft. They didn't shine. It just like it didn't reflect anything. And I guarantee if I'd thrown like a flashlight on it, wouldn't have reflected it. There was one light on it that slowly went around, and the machine, I could hear it. I guess because it was still functioning, and it had like a hum to it, like a really bass, like say if you unplugged an amp from a guitar, that kind of, you know, it was really, you know, it was really deep, and it kind of fluctuated, and then finally it just cut off, and everything just seemed to stop. But I felt this presence. I thought the creatures they called me, and it was like weird, and I think they were trying to communicate with me, like I guess telepathically. It's really weird. It's like basically sitting in your car and turning on like an AM station that's not, you know, it's just white noise, and just turning it up really high. After we climbed back up, I think the DOE, Department of Energy people were there. They knew about it. I had all my gear taken from me by men in black camis, had no name tags. They were older men, probably in their late 30s or 40s. They were there, and they had containment suits, and they landed 2 CH-47 Chinooks. They're Army twin rotor, you know, helicopters, and they're big, and they had guys coming out in these containment suits. They must have just got there, I don't know, while we were down in the gorge, because when we climbed up, there those guys were, there were the guys in the black camis. And then they put me on a cot that they had, and they had me cuffed with those, they had me cuffed both hands down, and then they had my legs tied together with those plastic fasteners that the police use. You know, they're like kind of like cuffs. And then they took me in the CH-47, and we took off, and they had a lieutenant colonel from the Air Force, and he did not identify himself, and he told me, you know, if we just took you out in the jungle, you know, they'd never find you out there. And I'm like, well, and you know, I didn't want to say, you know, I didn't want to test him to see if you'd really do that. So I said, yeah. And he's like, you got to sign these papers, and you never saw this, and I don't exist, and this situation never happened.
Yeah.
But he saw the craft. He actually got up close to the craft. He was able to see it from a few feet away.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of crashes, you know, and how is it possible that so many crashes are still so easy to wrap up? It's strange, but generally these crashes happen in rural areas. For instance, when you look at Roswell, Seth Shostak, the scientist from SETI, you know him? He said, well, a crash in New Mexico. What were they looking for? The New Mexico cuisine? And they crashed there? And I was like, you dirty bastard. You know.
That food is delicious.
Yeah.
Of course that's what they were looking for.
Of course they crashed there. I mean, the first nuclear tests were there. You as a scientist should know that. So you are playing the public by saying, what are they doing there? They like the cuisine, and like with looking like this, it's playing the public. Because the people who don't have any interest in this subject, they say, yeah, you're right. What do they find in New Mexico? Nothing. It's only desert. But we know that they had a lot to find there, because of the Trinity experiment or explosion. The first atomic bombs exploded there. So of course they were there. So, and Seth Shostak as a scientist should know that. But the fact that he is saying things for playing the public, it's the same like, no, they were crash test dummies. They didn't exist in 1947. Stanton Friedman said, that's nice. We have crash test dummies traveling in time.
as one of the founders and the moderator on UFOB, you have a perspective that a lot of people don't have. And Reddit is, as Pix said in our interview a few weeks ago, Reddit is probably the largest repository of UFO information on the internet. And certainly it's where much of the conversation is happening. There's UFO Twitter and then there's Reddit. And Reddit, I think, is probably much bigger in terms of just total content and people talking. Yeah. I have noticed, and I've heard others, and I've seen posts about this a lot, and I'm very curious about. It seems like there's an organized campaign to meddle in the conversation on Reddit. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, absolutely.
Do you see evidence of this? And what? And for those who don't, who may not know, I'll give you just a specific example. Would be the word grifter. It's a word that most people don't ever use. But when you go into UFOs or aliens, or I'm talking about on Reddit, the subreddits, UFOs, aliens, and you pick any alien related or UFO related subreddit, and you see something on like Danny Sheehan.
Yeah.
Underneath all the comments will be grifter, grifter, grifter. This guy's a grifter. He's just trying to make money. Grifter, grifter. 150 comments. And then you click on the screen name for the person, and it's an account that's 42 days old. It has no history. It's a nobody account. It's obviously a bot, or it's a troll, or it's something. As one of the moderators, what are you seeing, and what do you make of it? What's going on there?
Yeah, I see it on Twitter as well, the X nowadays. For instance, I was talking to somebody, and he's constantly grifter, blah, blah, blah. And then I made a screenshot and I sent it, and I noticed no response. It was like, okay, you're artificial intelligence because you cannot read the screenshot. Try it when you engage with these people, especially on X, because then you can send a screenshot of your text. But artificial intelligence doesn't read it. So then it's end of the conversation. And it's odd because they are really putting artificial intelligence now to engage with people. Because, of course, you do that. Because you cannot put a troll factory. I mean, it's just a lot of money to put people. But also, when you ask a person to do it, they ask questions. Well, why should I downplay UFOs? Why? Then somebody's thinking, okay, But artificial intelligence can do it for you. And that's what they use, especially on Twitter. Reddit, a lot of people, Reddit said that a lot of astroturfing came from Eglin Air Force Base. And it's possible that people are asked to downplay the subject. It's possible. Why? This is mainly being kept secret by the military. And I think personally that the military in Europe and the United States, they cooperate with each other. And they probably brief each other on the basic aspects, especially in the West. Australia, the Five Eyes. Five Eyes. So there has to be, because UFOs don't stop at the border. Yeah.
So you think, from your vantage point as one of the mods, do you see any meddling in UFOB? Do you come across that?
Yes, I see people, for instance, speaking very negatively, and I always look at the history of the person. What did you do? Have you been on UFOB before? No, nothing. And suddenly, there you are. So sometimes we decide to remove such a negative comment, but it's also a difficult one, because when you remove comments, people say, you're removing comments, and you have to keep it also criticism you have to accept. Okay, that's true. That's true. But on the other hand, then you have people saying, why don't you remove this comment? Because you're a UFO sub, and you're saying that it exists. You're saying that it's exotic intelligence or non-human intelligence. So why don't you remove it? So it's difficult to satisfy everybody. It's very difficult. And I think you have to find a balance in that. Yeah. And that's what we, and of course there are a lot of people promoting their own content, and I don't mind, as long as it's good content. I really don't mind. But it should not become too commercial. But I'm proud of what we achieved, and we're now heading to the 100,000 subscribers on Reddit, and on Twitter, I believe 45,000. So we're growing, and in a good way, not too fast, because growing too fast is not good as well. Yeah. And I see it more like we're one family. And that's how I see it. You're part of a community, so you are in essence a family. That's how I see it, and that's how we have to behave. And a lot of people fight over this subject online. No, it's demonic. No, it's interdimensional. No, it's ET. You know what I mean? I mean, look at what you have in common. Don't look at the differences. Because otherwise,
it's so confusing.
Yeah, it is.
It's so confusing, and I think you have genuine cases that are extraterrestrial or non-human. Then you have cases that are super advanced human technology, probably reverse engineered technology, that are being mistaken for UFOs or UAP. And then there are other cases that seem more esoteric, contact cases, in particular crop circles, abductions that seem to be somewhat on the periphery, but also related in a very interesting way. And I wonder, what are we talked a little bit at the beginning about abductions, and it seems like in the 90s, I remember this very well, there were Bud Hawkins, John Mack, Carla Turner, Dave Jacobs, and a few other researchers that really looked at this, and then that was it. And now there's no one. I don't know of anyone today who's looking at this. What is your opinion on the abduction phenomenon?
I have to go to David Grush, because David Grush said this is an interdimensional phenomenon. That's what he said. Recently, Anna Paulina Luna, the representative, also mentioned it after coming out of the skiff. So, but what is interdimensional? And that is important, because people say, okay, well, we have the 4 dimensions, or some say we have 9 dimensions, okay, and it's one of the dimensions is where they come from. But there is this physicist from the United States, a brilliant man, Hugh Everett. And Hugh Everett said that it's an idea that comes from physics. Universes can split, and it comes from quantum mechanics. And of course, it's an interpretation. It's not even a theory. But imagine if that is true. Then all the pieces of the puzzle, in my opinion, come together. Because in this many worlds hypothesis, the Earth exists in many places. And different versions of you walk around on these places. So it's crazy to think about, but on a certain Earth, you are already dead. And on another one, you won the lottery and you're a billionaire. And on another one, you're doing a podcast. So
I'm in the wrong one. I need to get to that page.
So okay, this is an interpretation. It's not even a theory. But this physicist was really ridiculed, and he later went working for the military, and then he died unhappy. And nowadays, you see that they're starting to look at his work again. And maybe you can show an image of him, a picture. Yeah, this guy. Yeah. You see what a large forehead he has? There's a lot of brain.
A lot of brain in there.
A lot of brain in there, yes. And there's a nice video of his son telling about his father and how difficult it was, because he wasn't really the social type, but he was a brilliant physicist. And I think we're going to hear more of him. That's my intuition that it will happen. Because if you show the image I sent to you by mail, this one, yes. Well, it looks a little bit complex, but when you see these universes splitting up, parallel Earths, parallel worlds, you can imagine. And then you see on the right side, you see these UFOs in this interpretation, because it's not a theory, but an interpretation, jumping between the worlds. You see? And that represents the red line. And the blue line represents a possible way to time travel, because they jump in a different way. You know what I mean? So, why do I think that this is something? This is interdimensional. This is traveling interdimensional. And why is it related to abductions? In my opinion, my personal opinion, I can be totally wrong, of course, but I think there's something to this. Is when you're from another planet, and when you come to the Earth, and you want to hybridize, hybridization between humans and something else, how is that even possible? Because the life developed totally differently on another planet. The chemistry is different. Maybe there isn't even DNA involved. And if it is, maybe it has a totally different structure. It's impossible. It's virtually impossible to do hybridization, to perform it. It's impossible. So why is it working? Possibly. Why are they creating hybrids if that is true? Well, in this parallel world scenario, it is possible, because all these planets, all these Earths are splitting and splitting and splitting. But that means there are different versions of you. But there are, when an Earth splitted a few million years ago, there was life, but it develops differently. Maybe we are related. Maybe the Greys are us from another parallel world, but their whole biology developed differently over time. And that means that hybridization is possible. It's just an idea, but why can they walk around on this planet? Why can they breathe here in our atmosphere? Because they walk around unprotected. If we go to another planet, the first thing we need is a helmet to breathe. But they don't need it. They walk around here. How is that possible? They are used to our gravity, because another planet generally is bigger or maybe much smaller. And they get crushed or they get blown up, So how is this? There is something we are missing. And that's what I try to show, that this is one possibility of them, first of all, knowing how our future will develop, because they can just jump to another world and see what our future is and go back. And in this way, because some people say, no, they are time travelers. Other people say, no, they are us from the future. So in this theory, everything comes together. And in this theory, hybridization works as well.
We know life exists here. So if you just start here, then you don't really have to invoke a galactic federation or anything else outside of Earth. You can just say, okay, well, in the future, on one version of Earth, somebody develops the capability to travel into other parallel versions.
Yes.
That would make sense.
Yeah. And perhaps they share technology between the parallel Earths. And that's crazy, because there are so many strange beings coming here and seen, even humans. even humans.
I think that's what's
UFOs.
so interesting is the variety of beings that people report seeing. There's so many different types, and the grays are very ubiquitous. We hear about short grays and tall grays, and then just going back to the abductee thing, there are cases where people report being taken. They go on board a craft. When they're taken by the grays. They go on board the craft. Something's done to them. There's an experiment or some type of medical procedure or some research process that goes on. That's when they meet the tall gray.
Yeah.
Usually there's one or two tall grays, maybe a dozen small grays, or there are many small grays, but one or two tall grays.
Yes.
And then occasionally you hear about the praying mantis, insectoid types, and then we hear about reptilians.
Yes.
And it starts to sound like when I started researching abductions, I fixated on that aspect of it a lot because these are people who are claiming to have been inside the craft. They actually have seen and talked to and interacted with these beings. So if you were trying to figure out what their motivations are, why are they here, what is it they're trying to accomplish, abductees would be the place to go. That's where your information is.
Yes.
On the outside, all we can really see are reports. We see lights. Maybe we have some satellite images. But we actually have people that are going on board these craft, allegedly, and coming back with very similar stories. And it's all very interesting. Like the reptilian thing, there could be a version of Earth where the dinosaurs did not go extinct. They continued to evolve.
Exactly. That's it.
And form a technological civilization. Or there's a version of Earth where insects go on and evolve and they become the dominant species.
Bingo. Yeah. So this and that's what I mean with this theory. And this theory or interpretation, all the pieces of the puzzle come together. It's a crazy puzzle. And because when you speak about somebody, to somebody about mantis, they are like, huh? What's this? What are you talking about? But in this theory, every piece of the puzzle comes together. And so we have to focus on it because maybe there's something to it. And, but of course, this also explains maybe cattle mutilations because they collect DNA from here. Imagine that there are planets that need to be or where the DNA is degenerating because of wars, nuclear wars or something. It's totally you can imagine that they need a refreshment of the DNA, and they can easily get it here. So or maybe they are seeding other planets with life. It's also possible, but. This theory, this is the interdimensional theory, in fact. And it comes from physics. So we have to do more with this, I think. But that's my personal opinion. And again, I can be totally wrong. But
it gets even more interesting too, right? Because we also have people who report, and I think this is very common, that they see humans or beings that look indistinguishable from you and me and everyone else, except maybe they're all 6 feet 10 inches tall, and they have, they're built like bodybuilders. For some reason, they seem like genetically superior human beings, right?
Yes, and there is this Philadelphia experiment. It's still a very, it's rumors, but is there something to it? But because this fits also into that theory that we can jump maybe to the other worlds. Yeah. And what if it goes wrong, with this ship, the Eldridge? I don't know if you know about the experiment, the Philadelphia
experiment. This is where supposedly the sailors rematerialized and people were sticking out of the wall and their arms were fused to the floor. Yeah. There's a scene in, I don't know, are you a big Star Trek person?
Yeah.
There's a scene in Star Trek, the motion picture. Remember the very first one where they test the transporter? There's something wrong with the transporter and they beam somebody on board and they're turned into like goo because the transporter malfunctioned.
Yeah.
I feel like that's basically the idea, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So it's maybe we are already good at it. Maybe reverse engineering also means that we are already jumping to other worlds. That's a crazy idea, but it's possible. And of course you want to keep that secret, because that means that you can decide what the future is like, for instance. So it's crazy, and it's still fringe, but it's good to think about it. Yeah.
It's an interesting thought, because it does also, like, I think about the nuclear connection, right? So there's a few different things going on there. The nuclear connection could be, the universe is full of nuclear explosions and fusion. And I mean, the universe is very violent. Space is a very violent, dangerous place. There's a lot of things that can kill you. And a human-made nuclear weapon is probably the least among them, like, that any alien should be worried about. Unless they're already here, in which case then it's a threat to the biosphere. And maybe the biosphere as a whole is they're more interested in protecting that than us specifically.
Yes.
But it could also be that a nuclear explosion here on Earth reverberates through other adjacent versions of Earth, and they are able to detect that the same way that we can detect ripples in gravity waves from the Big Bang or something like that. And that's how they're able to hone in on our universe at a particular time, almost like a QR code. They can just go there.
Yes.
Because that's where the explosion happened.
It's like a tree, and when you have a branch and you cut it, or you saw it for a part, it will die. The entire branch will die. And it's like Earth. If we split up all the time, our universe, and many worlds will, and we blow our world up, then it reverberates, and the entire branch will die off. So that's how I see it. And maybe they are trying to prevent it. And many abductees see screens with events that are going to happen on this planet. And they see wars, they see misery, they see environmental problems. And maybe they can jump to our future in parallel worlds because they know what the outcome is going to be. And but we still have a choice. And maybe that's the whole thing that they want to show us. We have a choice to change the outcome. Because it may have happened on a parallel world, but not on ours.
I wonder how much of the secrecy is about the actual collapse of society. Like, I don't know if I buy that. Like, what does that even mean, society would collapse? Does that just mean that most people would stop wanting to go to their shitty job and go to work for some stupid boss that they don't like? Like if you found out tomorrow that there's a starship in orbit that is like 1 million years more advanced and there's this whole civilization, like, how do you really want to go on with the stupid game that we're all playing? Or maybe the secrecy has more to do with the legal entanglements of how many people would have to go to jail if it really came out, all of the stuff that they've done to cover it up. I feel like that's got to be more what's going on.
Yes, and that's the thing. That's the thing. A lot of Americans pay their taxes, and the Department of Defense didn't pass 6 audits by now. 6 audits, And what are they doing with this money? Money from the public. I mean, it disappears, and it's like there is some kind of an elite who can do whatever they want, and the public is just paying for it and working very hard for it, but doesn't benefit from it. Now that's strange. Yeah, because in a normal situation, they develop technology and it benefits the world, or it benefits at least the Americans. But nothing like that is happening. Yeah, we protect you. Okay, how? Yeah, it's secret technology. Okay, but how can we even check if that is happening? So there is something strange happening. It's the same with NASA. Everybody paid. I mean, this new telescope, billions of dollars, and what do people benefit from it? We have seen one picture. Or a few pictures, I must say, but we have seen one picture above space. And you really think they didn't see by now things that are crazy? Of course, I already heard about certain scientists saying, oh my God, but the implications is incredible. And then they were silent. So they already discovered things, but they keep it silent. And that's what I hate about this whole thing. that in essence you create an elite that has access to knowledge, and the people are kept dumb. And it's a big shame.
I think that's what's going on right now. I think that's why the secrecy is starting to fall apart, because after 75 years of this, there has been so much cross-pollination. I mean, think about it. It starts out as a very controlled, very tight program, very small, maybe only a few specific people pulled from the Atomic Energy Commission and a few other places, some Nazi scientists from Paperclip put on this. And then as the years go on, the technology is farmed out to corporations. They start to reverse engineer it. Engineers leave. They go start other companies, different people. The companies merge. Things change hands. I think by now, they probably don't even know who has what technology anymore. I think a lot of these programs have become, it's gone from one program into many programs, and there's some overlap, but I don't think the left hand even knows what the right hand's doing anymore. And that's just in the United States. As you mentioned, I mean, we have, and you're Dutch, you guys have great social services here in the United States. We've been told for my entire life, we can't afford healthcare, we can't afford college education, we can't afford this, we can't afford that, we can't afford any entitlements. We don't have the money. But the military, we have enough money to give them anything they want forever. And I feel like by now, the amount of breakthroughs that have probably happened, you can't have 75 years of research with an unlimited budget without making some amazing progress.
No. The United States is the richest country on the planet. Think about that. The richest country on the planet. Where is the healthcare system? The good healthcare system. Where is it? You can have 10 of them. You can have 20 of them. Easily. Where is it? Where is that money going? Infrastructure, I hear a lot of Americans complain about the bridges, the roads, etc. How is it possible that in Europe you can the roads are good? At least in Holland, I can this is also possible in the United States. When you're fired, you can have an income. In the Netherlands, it happens when you get fired. The government pays you. And you get a possibility to go to find another job. And meanwhile, you don't have to sell your house. How come it's not possible in the United States? It is possible.
I actually know a guy who during the COVID lockdowns actually had to sell his house. He got downsized from his job and had to sell his home. And then he wound up renting a home from somebody else to live in. And then another guy had to sell his car. The United States is a scary place, and I say that now as a father of a young child, and I think about it differently than when it's just you. You're like, I'll figure it out. But when you have a family, you start to think about these things, and I think about this a lot. It's terrifying. The idea of if you are not, you either have you have to be a success, or you are forgotten and left to die, and that's just how it is here.
Yes, and it is Americans are good people. I engage with them every day. Lovely people. But they all have one thing in common. They don't trust the government. And that's one of the most important things to know. That I think personally, but it's my conspiracy. My personal conspiracy is that after Kennedy, something changed. I call it a silent coup d'etat. And in essence, the DOD or the Pentagon is ruling the country. And they're not doing it very well. And it's a conspiracy, I have to say it. But in everything I see, everything I research, everything I do, I think this happened. And because, for instance, the Iran-Contra affair, if you really take a look at it, the CIA, drug trafficking. Sorry, how is this even possible? And then there were hearings, and they didn't do anything with it. Why? Well, it could be detrimental to government as a whole. Yeah, fuck it. It's a crime, and you have to put these people behind bars. Period. Yeah. It didn't happen, and now it happens again. with this arrow and these lies around UFOs. And what are you doing? What do you want? And the thing, I have the idea that they are sitting on exotic technology. They are not going to share it with the American citizens. Never. They want this technology for themselves. And that's the dilemma that the Congress of the United States is now facing. Because if these people succeed in reverse engineering, they become rulers of the planet. And this is facilitated at this moment. So the Congress has to hurry up now and make sure that there is more transparency and that these people get behind bars, or they get immunity or whatever. But they have to do something. To leave it like this is impossible. You cannot do it.
I feel like the situation is very unstable right now. And I think that the instability, the global strategic situation is what's pushing this forward. My sense is that there's the United States program, which is run in tandem with Europe and Australia. That's all one, not one program, but that's one faction, right? Then you have Russia and China. That's probably, maybe India is doing their own thing just because of the amount of space that they have to monitor. But my sense is that somebody else has made some breakthroughs, and maybe they're a little further along than we are. And there is a question about the United States cannot maintain control over disclosure forever. Sooner or later, what if China demonstrates a functional anti-gravity craft publicly? And suddenly China is leading the world and they have anti-gravity technology out in the open. How could the United States suddenly come out and say, oh, we have it too. We've had it for 50 years. We just didn't tell you about it. It's going to be something like that, is my sense. A very human kind of stupid thing that's going to bring all of this out into the open.
Like Vladimir Putin only has to say to the Americans, your government is lying to you because they are hiding exotic technology. It will create havoc, you know? I mean, he has this weapon in his hand and he can use it. The reason he is not using it probably is because he has to explain things to his own people. But on the other hand, it's a totalitarian regime, so it's not difficult to keep the people in line. But for a democracy, it's devastating. Because people will be angry, they will not trust the government, etc. So Putin has this weapon in his hand, and he can use it. And that's the vulnerability that the intelligence community and the DoD, in fact, is creating. It's a vulnerability, and I call it it's like a danger to national security. That's what they are creating. Be transparent, be honest. How difficult is it? Your citizens are not children.
I think there's a great quote. Are you a fan of Colonel Corso, Phil Corso?
Yes.
Did you ever see that interview with him where he says, he's like, tell the people.
Yes.
Because we sent 18-year-old kids and 17-year-old kids into machine gun fire in World War II, and we trusted them to do that. They fought a war that nobody else today could fight, and it was just a different mindset. So why can't they handle this?
Yes.
I think I also think there's a sense of competing. There are I see three different things happening at the same time, and I want to get your thoughts on this. It seems like our best science tells us that the biosphere is collapsing, and that if we don't radically change the way that we produce energy on this planet within 50 years, we won't really be able to maintain an organized global civilization anymore. It'll be too chaotic. And for people who don't follow this every day, what I'm talking about is 8 billion people have to eat regularly, 3 meals a day, at least 1 meal a day, to survive and to continue on with this whole thing that we're doing, right? And if we get to a point where the climate is so unstable that we can't grow grain at scale, and you can't grow corn, wheat, oats, whatever, the rice, the staple crops to feed that many people, you're going to have chaos. So you have the environmental catastrophe, and we know that's happening. Then we have artificial intelligence, which some say, even today, right now, as we sit here having this conversation, some have suggested that there's already artificial general intelligence in the lab that could explode into artificial superintelligence any moment. And it might already be out in the wild that we don't even know about. It could be hidden in somewhere in the internet, just lurking. And then you have the UFO, UAP, non-human intelligence thing. And those three, out of those three things, the collapse of the biosphere has a ticking clock attached to it. We can pretty much predict when that's going to take place. We're already seeing the global surface ocean temperature is higher than it's ever been, and it's frightening. And we know that artificial intelligence is at worst 50 years away, 20 years away. Could be next year, could be here now. We don't know, but it's coming. So of those two, the question of non-human intelligence, of those three things, two of them involve us human beings not being at the top of the food chain anymore.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's a really strange time to be alive because we're watching all of this unfold all around us. And I wonder how much of these things are connected to each other. Is the interest in Earth and our civilization right now because we're destroying the biosphere? Is it because we're creating artificial life? Is it both? What do you think?
It's I see it as a point of convergence. Everything comes together at some point. And I'm a pessimist. I'm not an optimist. And that's because I'm also a realist. I see the things happening, and you can calculate already that this is going to into the wrong direction. And nobody wants to give up their life. Nobody wants to give up flying. Nobody wants to give up eating meat and stuff. And that's, I think, what governments do wrong. They for instance, do you know Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum?
Yeah.
This guy said, okay, you will own nothing, but you will be happy. In fact, he's trying to get some communism, spread communism around. And they are interfering with the food. And so, in fact, they are already creating a system, in my opinion, to keep the people in line. For instance, they want digital currency. And this digital currency is easy because when you add a social credit system to it, every time you do something wrong or you have a big mouth about your government, they can close down your bank accounts. And you cannot go to the store, you can do nothing because there is no cash. But this is where they want us to go. So they are already creating now systems to keep the people in line and to keep us silent and to keep us, to prevent people from starting a revolution or something. So on the high level, they already talk about it, how to do it. And it's dangerous because this is a period in which we have to fight for our freedom. Really have to fight for our freedom. And but on the other hand, we have to act also. We cannot live the way we always did. Especially when we're now with 8 billion people on the planet. I think we can maintain a lot more people on this planet. But when there are billionaires becoming even richer and richer every day, we can have a discussion with each other. Is that what we want? Because some people get everything and some people get nothing. But the problem is that people will always say, communism or socialism. Yeah. And that's also always a difficult discussion. Maybe you have to call it a fair share and leave the whole communism thing and the socialism out because it's people don't like it, But when you say we have to share everything or share it in a more humane way, everybody would agree.
I don't know that this is true, but I just suspect that some of the motivation for whistleblowers coming forward to try and get this information out has something to do with the declining state of the environment right now and how fast things are. I think if you really wanted to look for a conspiracy theory, if you want to look for a conspiracy, I hate that word, but it seems to me that the real conspiracy is that climate change is a lot worse than they've told us. It's just way worse, way, way, way worse. And I share your pessimistic attitude. Sometimes I get really down on the situation because it's scary. And you see the people who are at the most educated on this, they're very nervous about, they're saying the window to take action is really closing, if it's not already closed. And we're talking like 10 years. And not just 10 years to start making changes, 10 years to stop flying, stop driving, pump no oil out of the ground, completely stop all of it. And then we have to throw it in reverse and start pulling carbon out of the atmosphere because we've put so much in the atmosphere. And I wonder how much of the push for disclosure, I often say David Grush, when he first came forward, he was 36 years old. The people in the program aren't 75 years old. They're in their 30s. They're in their 40s. They have children. They have families. They have, and they are engineers. They're scientists. They can read the data. They look at what's going on. And maybe they know that we're sitting on the technology to leapfrog to Star Trek technology. And we could do that inside of a 20-year period if we could just get the information out.
I shared a video on Twitter recently about a man, Stanley was his name, and he developed a way to split the hydrogen atoms and oxygen from water. And the way he did it was, there's much more energy coming out than went in. So he developed a car that would drive on water. Of course, it drives on hydrogen, but then there was interest from the Pentagon, and it's all there because it's all in the news. And then when finally he had a meeting with NATO officials, and he was going to sign a contract, and he died on the spot. And
it's funny how that works.
You can say like, okay, maybe it was a fraud because they say, no, he was a fraud. But what if it's true? Maybe he did find a way because he said a high pulsating frequency splits the splits the molecule into hydrogen atoms and hydrogen and oxygen. So what if it's true? Then they just killed a person who literally gave the world clean energy to drive. And that means that the whole system we have now is maintained, but to make a few people rich. But what good is it to be filthy rich on a planet that dies? Don't these people have children and grandchildren? Don't they want a better future? So what good is it to keep this system when there are already scientific breakthroughs to get more clean energy, for instance? I don't understand it because, but I think everybody is looking at each other. Are you doing something about it? Maybe you are doing something about it, but we have to work together and do it. Period.
It's going to take an entire generation, a paradigm shift to really bring us out of this. And I that's kind of my hope for the subject of ufology. And if I had one hope for it in general, it's that something big will happen that snaps people out of it. You know, like when COVID shut down the whole world, it caused everyone to stop for a minute, for a few weeks, and we really just took a break. And as soon as people got that break, they started to think, hey, maybe work isn't the most important thing. Maybe family's more important. Maybe they started to question their priorities. And it was a big mental shift for so many people.
Yes.
And I wonder if something like that, or even bigger, is in our future, and maybe there is going to be a moment. I've heard rumors. I wonder if you've heard these, and then we're running short on time. I need to wrap it up with this. But have you heard the chatter about there's supposedly going to be an announcement this year that the James Webb Space Telescope has detected signs of life on another planet? Have you heard anything about this?
Yes. Biosignatures.
Biosignatures.
Yes. But on the thing is with NASA, they are behaving very strange, because there was this hearing. James Fox was there also, and Bill Nelson was like, "No, there's no evidence," and James Fox said, "But no, there's no evidence." And I'm like, okay. And now the DOD or Kirkpatrick and the error report, there's no evidence. Okay. But at some point you have to come forward. But maybe they have a plan, like, okay, at first we let the people get used to biosignatures, found on another planet. At least we are showing we are in control or something. And then maybe later UFOs, non-human intelligence, I don't know, but I think they're messing it up totally, especially NASA. They are messing it up. But maybe they are under restrictions. I don't know. But who is telling them what to say? That's what I find very interesting. There is this control group who is dictating what everybody can say or not. And it's a very powerful control group. And they have their tentacles all over the place. And who they are, I have no clue. I don't know. But we don't know their names. We don't know their faces. But still, they decide everything.
I think you mentioned earlier in the conversation, you talked about Timothy Gallaudet, the admiral, the American admiral, and he talked about in his, I'm assuming you watched his Soul Foundation presentation, did you not? And he talked about having, when they would see these craft during training exercises, how he, and I think it was like 5 or 6 other admirals, had an email chain. Do you remember this? They were emailing each other, and they were saying, "Do you know what this is? Do you know what this is? I don't know what it is. How about you? Do your satellites see anything?" And then one day he goes into his office and he turns on his computer, and all his emails have been wiped from his computer, and everyone else's computer too. And these are admirals.
Yes.
So someone up higher than that, someone like,
crazy.
How much higher do you go?
Yeah. But the entire system was reformed after Roswell. I mean, a week after the Roswell crash, they created the predecessor of the CIA, and it was renamed CIA in 18 September 47. And that's after Roswell. The Air Force was created after the Roswell crash. also the 18th of September 47. So the entire system was reformed. Why? Well, Roswell was the turning point, because Truman back then, of course, he didn't know what to do with it. And he was like, okay, you have to reform everything, because it changed the entire, their worldview, you know? So they had to do something. So, yeah, I think that has everything to do with it.
Ramsey, I wonder, what are you looking forward to in the rest of 2024? Do you think there's something coming around the corner? What do you see in store for the subject?
Well, the situation we're now in is that the non-elected, the Pentagon, are in essence bumping against the elected. That's what we're seeing happening at this moment. And Congress must take the lead now. And they are doing it with the UAP caucus. But still, they have to do more, because at this moment, it's still... I think we will see more transparency coming, but it will be extremely difficult for the Department of Defense to finally come clean. Especially when you even lied in the Arrow report. It's very difficult. But it's the only way forward. And I think we will see Congress taking the lead more and more. And they are working behind the scenes at this moment, very hard to get it done. But it's not easy. It's very difficult, because it's a double-edged sword for them. Because imagine they are faced with the public, the response of the public. They are faced with, because the government is the government, and people see the Pentagon as the government, and they see the Congress as the government, but it's not one entity. And that's the whole thing. So I think we will see more coming from that in the near future.
Is there anything else you would like to tell the people watching or listening? What can they do to move this conversation in the right direction?
Yeah, knowledge is power. So my advice is learn about the cases, because that's what it all comes down to. When you know about the cases, you have knowledge, you have power. Because when people are discussing things with you, you can say, no, that's not true, because it went like this or like that, you know. And go back to the source. And the source are the cases. The whole circus around it, what politicians are saying, what admirals are saying, or whatever, take it in, okay. But the cases is the core business. You know, the core business. So my advice would be learn about it, and also about cases in abroad, for instance. And later on, you have a lot you benefit from it, from this knowledge. I notice, because when I have a lot of case knowledge, and I notice that it helps me a lot in my daily engagement in the community. So that's my advice.
We'll leave it there.
Yes.
I'm so glad that we were able to finally make this happen after going back and forth a lot. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you, man. I love your podcast.
Well, thank you. I'll send everyone over to UFOB's YouTube channel as well. I always send people to UFOB. That's the place to be.
Absolutely. And you know when people don't like anything, talk to us, because that's the whole thing. You know, come to us. We're people. We're human beings. You can discuss everything.
Ramsey, thank you so much. I'll let you get back to it. Okay?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.